environmental issues, infection prevention, and then safety. So this is a snapshot of the method that we took. So we started off with a literature review, looking at different documents by the World Health Organization to create a draft checklist, which we gave to each of the participating countries. And then, of course, you guys are here, as well as the 4 other countries. From this, we tried to understand what was working and what was not working. And then ultimately we came to a point where we thought, okay, these are the categories or the criteria that we need to assess this primary healthcare center for climate resilience, environmental sustainability, IPC, which is a technical term, infection prevention and control, and then safety, which includes structural but other things as well. And then we went back to do a case study, in this case the Thailand case study. So these were the 4 main documents that we looked at. They're all by the World Health Organization, the WHO. The first 2 about climate resilience and environmental sustainability. One is kind of like a guidebook, the other one is like a checklist. A checklist which we used to take some of the assessment criteria, but not all of it was relevant. Another very important one was the HSI, the Hospital Safety Index. We took a lot of the safety things from that. And the last one was about infection prevention and control, particularly coming out from the pandemic and airborne diseases, and plus some other documents as well. We took the things that related to the built environment and how to improve the building according to these criteria. The slide, which I always say I never understood, right? Still don't understand it now. So the overall framework was about how to make healthcare centers resilient to climate change and make them environmentally sustainable, so they're not harming the environment but making the environment better. But the other thing is how we need to control the spread of diseases or problems in the first place. And this is general health, disaster risk management type of thing. Normally we could try to remove the hazard or the elimination, but you can't just simply stop COVID, right? Or a flood or a tsunami. So the next thing down is the substitution, to replace the hazard. The next thing is engineering controls, and that's where we come in, to try to use the design of our building to stop the spread of diseases or things like that. I'll just skip that. The last one is going to, like, if you can't control or do anything about the hazard, then of course you just have to wear personal protective equipment or PPE. So what we're trying to look at is how engineering controls through design of the built environment can help to mitigate climate change and make things more sustainable. So this is the table of our 4 categories. We call them 4 domains for the assessment of the the primary healthcare center. The first one is climate resilience. The second is environmental sustainability. The third is infection prevention and control, and the last one is safety. Each one has a letter, C, E, I, and S, which you'll see down here. For each of these 4 domains, we had 3 subcategories. So we had to see how the facility, in other words, the building, the actual structure of the building was resilient to climate, was safe, etc. Or the energy was also, like using sustainable energy sources and things like that. And WASH, that means water, sanitation and hygiene, and waste. And so these 3 subcategories would run through these 4 main categories. And within each of these categories, there were these checklist items. So I can start showing you some of them. So the first category or domain is climate resilience, being the topic of the summer school, right? So this one is essentially about how facilities can anticipate, respond or cope to or recover from extreme weather coming from climate change impacts. And the color code is green. So one example, even though tsunami was more like sea level rise, but it's the idea that the building is resistant or being able to withstand sea level rise or tsunamis. Another one, of course, is typhoons or hurricanes or cyclones. The building should be strong enough to resist heavy winds. Another checklist item, of course, is flooding. So the building, is it resistant to flood, like raised above the ground, for instance, like that? The next one is about environmental sustainability, and this one is focusing not on the climate issues, but more on like the sun, wind, light, and other issues, and waste. And we found out that actually 4.4% of the global greenhouse gas emissions are actually coming from the healthcare sector, because the healthcare sector also produces lots of waste and other issues. And so that has to be managed. So one of the items that we studied there was about energy, because energy is about how we can sustainably use our resources. So clean and renewable energies from the sun or from the wind. And does it use that or does it not? Shading, so of course we have to provide natural light, but coming from the tropical climate that we are in now, of course, we're not just trying to bring in the light, but we also need to stop the heat from coming into the building. So that's like the shading device that we have there. It can be, horizontal or vertical. Another thing, of course, is maximizing natural ventilation. So having openings on both sides to allow for cross ventilation, and possibly raising the height of the ceiling to allow for more air to circulate. The next category is IPC, infection prevention and control. So by that, we're looking at how can the building have spaces that would allow for patients to isolate and things like that. So this is one, it's called triage, another medical term. It means to identify whether someone has illness or does not have illness, or has the COVID symptoms or not. And if you do have COVID symptoms, then you should have a different colored tag, and that will help to separate people with the symptom or without symptoms. And then, of course, your building design needs to respond to that. So you have like a isolated space for the separation of the patients. And because COVID and other diseases are spreading a lot through water, and of course we need to wash our hands regularly. Hope you still do. And so that's why we had, one of the items was there water services that are available at all times. And the last category was safety, and I think Fajar, you were the one looking after this group. We had each instructor looking after a different group according to their speciality. And so safety was about not just building structure, but also like fire and other aspects. So of course we have a structural connections one. This diagram is trying to show that roof to wall, wall to floor, that the structural connections are safe. Vulnerability to fire, and so they identify different sources of fire, and then making sure that the building can reasonably take fire safety measures. And then emergency power supply, because if you're in a healthcare facility, you need to make sure electricity is operating for essential equipment. So each of those diagrams I showed you before, actually they were items that you had to check off on a checklist, and then you had to give them a score, like low if it's non-existent or not there at all, average if it's sort of there but not working as fully as you intend, and then high when it's like performing really well. And each of these are given a score, like low is 1 point, average is 2 point, and high is 3 point. And with these three answers, which you can use to answer all the checklist items, you end up having an overall score. So each of the 4 categories had a number of questions. And so the safety, there was a lot of safety questions. Fajar had a really tough time. 20 more questions than the other person who was looking at environmental. So we had 4 different categories, but not all categories had the same number of checklist items. Now that was the total number. And then each checklist item, you can get up to 3 points at the highest, right? So that's why that will be the total score if you end up getting a 3 for everything. So we went to take this checklist to the Thai case study, Primary Healthcare Center, and this is what we found. We found that safety was performing really well. They would get a lot of marks from the safety category, but environmental sustainability, not so much. But this is I think this was the unfair comparison because this is based on how much they were able to answer. Because environmental sustainability had less questions, you can't compare each category in an even way. So they had to do a weighted comparison. And so we saw in the comparison that even though environmental sustainability was doing much less, it wasn't doing too bad because it didn't have as many questions. We could see from this that safety and IPC were actually doing really well, and because they're, in our case study, they were actually like a space to separate the patients with COVID, and structurally it was like 50 years old, 50, but then the building was still performing quite well. In terms of environmental sustainability, it wasn't doing well because it had no solar panels or renewable energy resources. So that's why we had, so this method of assessment, coming to the end of this part here, is saying we can use this tool to assess any primary healthcare center in Southeast Asia to see how it performs in terms of climate resilience, environmental sustainability, safety, and IPC, and then make the appropriate recommendations to go, oh, your environmental sustainability is not so good, so maybe you can install solar panels and something like that. So this tool is not just an academic exercise, but something that we can use for healthcare centers or the Ministry of Public Health. I think I'll leave that. Does anyone want to scan this? You can scan this and see the actual checklist. It's still there, untouched, from July 27th. And for JAR, actually what we had to do was come up with a spreadsheet, because they have used the tool again, but they had to come up with a spreadsheet to do the calculation, because the Google form doesn't do the calculation. So after filling in the form, they still need to give them the spreadsheet. So I think the Belgium team made a spreadsheet to help do that calculation. And I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Low, for the very insightful discussion and presentation. We might learn a lot of things from the presentation. The cases that he presented is quite similar about what we are facing right now. Actually, most of the audience today are the student from the third year, I guess, the second year or third year. They have passed Studio Design 3, which is actually, the project was about making a healthcare facilities, Dr. Low. So they might learn a lot of things from this. But even though you guys have passed, I think we could learn a lot of checklists from the cases that Dr. Low presented today. So the solution might be more comprehensive that we already are in the process of learning in the campus. Also, we will have a stimulator, a responder from the first topic, Dr. Low, from Ibu Rizky Fitria Madina. She will stimulate questions that might give us a relation to our cases in Indonesia. That might be. Ibu Rizky Madina, please. Okay.
Thank you, Mas Aklis. First of all, thank you, Dr. Low, for the summary of Summer School 2023. I think this is a great idea that now we have an assessment tools for evaluate primary healthcare facilities resilience to climate change, environmental sustainability, prevention of infection, and overall safety. In Indonesia, primary healthcare facilities, we usually call it as puskesmas. We have design guidelines from Ministry of Health, but in the design guidelines, I don't think we have specifically addressed the climate change and the environmental sustainability. So I think this is a great idea that we can bring it to the stakeholders. In the last semester, like Mr. Akli said, that we have a design project about puskesmas, but we focused on the universal design and accessibility. They also conducted a simple research project about the accessibility, but they have not discussed about the aspect areas that like sustainability or so. I think this is a great idea for future academic research and design projects. And I believe this, what this summer school has done with the assessment tools can be utilized as future academic research and joint research maybe, or community service initiative and involving the local stakeholders. One question, who do you think is the most appropriate to carry out this assessment? Because the target is mostly facility manager. Do you think the one who assess should be the manager only, or the government itself, or the academic researcher? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for the question, and thank you for the comments. Actually, I should be very harsh and give this to Alifia to answer the question. This is one of the questions that you should have been able to answer from the summer school. There was a slide which I didn't include, which was actually about the target audience. But coming to think back, it is a good question about who will be the most appropriate person. It could be something even like a building surveyor, because you do need someone who has some trained eye in how to assess the structure of a building. You can't just expect a building manager or even someone that works there. I think it will be a collaborative effort in the spirit of collaboration. I don't think it will be one person that's doing it, because you probably need people that know how the building works, how people are using the building to be able to do it. So one of the reasons why we did the Thai case study so quickly was because we had 20-something students in just 1 or 2 hours able to assess everything. So I think it's probably better if it was a collaborative effort. But ultimately, someone does need to sign it off and say the task was done. So maybe the building manager or something. But you did raise a good point about stakeholders, and that's where the WHO comes in, because we intended to work with the WHO regional partners to work with their Ministry of Health to implement this type of tool. And so they would probably have some way of saying or certifying that this was an accurate assessment. But that also raises that the Ministry of Health personnel should also be involved in this assessment. So you can see it's kind of multi-level, vertically and horizontally. People that know how the building works, but people that need to do this in a kind of professional fashion. So yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you, Dr. Le. That okay, Ms. Medina? Okay, we will open the questions to the audience also. It might be the student and lecturer, the dean and the vice dean might raise questions, discussion. We will have a discussion a little bit more time forward, maybe. There is a questions from the audience. Maybe this is a more practical, non-practical questions, maybe, from the academy point of view, Dr. Low, with kind of this activity that you just done at the summer school, and then our student also have presented the attendance there. And how do you think, in what extent, this kind of assessment and a checklist, as you might say, can implement it in the design process, in the way of learning in the studio architecture? What do you think in academia point of view, Dr. Low?
Thanks for the question, Aklish. Actually, this is a bit of reverse engineering, because this is intended to inform design guidelines. So actually, when we're looking at checklists, different categories, okay, the building is doing this, not doing this. In theory, if the building was following the good guidelines, then it should be able to tick all the boxes. So actually what this, as I said, is reverse engineering. So now that we've identified all the criteria that the building needs to perform in, we can now generate a set of design guidelines that will help the building to perform well in all of those categories. So yeah, it's a kind of chicken and egg kind of, yeah.
Which one going to first? Which one is going to be the second? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. All else is maybe from the audience or the lecturer maybe want to ask questions. Time. Okay. Maybe save it for later. Maybe they are processing. We are processing now, Dr. Adrian. We will have okay. We have questions from Ibu Iim. This is our lecturer.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Adrian Lo. It's very interesting topic that you bring here. I think it's a very, that you explain the checklist is very, very useful, yeah, for the design of health facilities, especially to face the climate change and maybe the condition of pandemic. But my concern here is about public space. Not only because my major is in public space and I have a research about public space. So my question is it possible to implement that checklist to for the design of public space? I think design of public space in the condition of climate change and pandemics is also very important. My research find that during the pandemic, people are tend to more interested to the public space, yeah, and I found that after the pandemic, public spaces in Jakarta is also is more vibrant than before. So is it possible that your checklist is developed into to assess the public space? Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for the question. Being the lecturer in urban design, I should have an answer to that question, but I don't. Actually, because we were looking at really specific, like a single type of building, and infection prevention and control becomes mainly more important in interior, like indoor spaces, because if you can just do it outdoors, then that's even better. So actually, having a checklist is one step, but having more like a set of guidelines or design principles for the design of or the usage of outdoor spaces in a post-pandemic era to avoid the spread of diseases is probably something we could consider. But so yeah, so actually no clear answer to that, because the whole thing is that if you can't do things outdoors, then there's certain things you have to do indoors. So it's encouraging to use outdoor spaces, but that means unless we're talking about interior public spaces like shopping malls, then maybe there could be something, yeah. Because by being outdoors, by definition, you're already safe from viruses. Of course, we're still wearing your face mask. Climate resilience or environmental sustainability of public spaces goes beyond just health, though, isn't it? So I think that those kind of issues should nevertheless be looked at. Yes, but it's interesting when you mention it, because we can start to look at certainly other types of buildings where the health of people are important, or public spaces which are indoors like shopping malls and things like that. That could be another thing. Thank you.
Yeah, because public space now is in a very variable form of public space, not only outdoor but also indoor.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that your checklist investing and it may be developed to assess the public space.
Sounds like another summer school.
Bu Im? Was it? That was okay. Thank you, Bu Im. All right, thank you, Dr. Edwin Lo, for the explanation. Maybe that will be our next activity, Dr. Edwin Lo, to assess a public space, because now in Indonesia also we are facing a very massive development of housing, and we are trying to also design most likely outdoor offices, so that we could have a more natural circulation. As we speak, we are facing airborne disease, so that we have prevent this kind of type of way. There's a lot of guidelines, there's a lot of development of protocols. We are trying to invite a lot of expert to our cases. So might be we have future with Dr. Adrenli to lead the way. To lead the way. Okay, is there anything to add, or questions maybe from the student that might, because this is a very important college for us to learn about a lot of things, energy, prevention, and also the design, how we implement it to the design process. No, not yet. Maybe we will have another questions later. We will going to the next topic. Yes. Oh, a coffee break. Oh, all right. I'm sorry. We have a inside information from the committee that we will have a coffee break for about how many minutes, sir? 10 to 15 minutes, probably. Okay. We'll come back to our interesting topic, the second topic, while we are going to have a coffee break. Okay. We will go back to the master of ceremony. Time is yours. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we will have a coffee break for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we should get back here. Thank you.
to this event again. And the next agenda will be led by the moderator. To Mr. Akhris Dinal Aziz, you may take the lead again.
Okay, thank you very much for the task. Speaker, Dr. Adrian Low, you may come to the podium. Sorry, please. Yes. All right, we will have our second topic today. Also, again, our responder for the topic is Ibu Riri today. Okay, the second topic with the title of Density and Transit, Understanding Hong Kong's Vertical Compact City. As we may know that Hong Kong has a very dense population and also very limited spaces. So they come up with the ideas and solution and innovation that we might learn from today's presentation that will be presented by Dr. Adrian Low. Okay, to cut off the time, please, Doctor. Density and Transit, Understanding Hong Kong's Vertical Compact City.
So now that we had our break, so we're ready for round two. Moving on. Wow, you're not working. Okay, good. So, this is part of a much bigger topic about urbanization, moving up, urbanization, and why we need to look at cities given today's context. So, as Aklish was saying, density is an issue in Hong Kong, but I give it density firstly overall, about the whole world's density. So urbanization. I think there's going to be a bit of a change here. Hands up who's heard of the term urbanization before? Urbanization. You've heard it now. Right. So urbanization means the movement of people from rural areas or less urban areas to cities. Okay? The process started some 200 years ago in the Industrial Revolution. It started mainly in the more developed countries in the West, but now it's happening particularly in the countries in the global South. So urbanization is the movement of people to cities. Okay? So next time I ask anyone who's heard of urbanization, everyone should raise their hand. Urbanization can take place in other ways, such as the natural birth rate, of course, where the natural birth rate is higher than the death rate, or even through the merging of smaller municipalities into one larger city. Many ways a city can become bigger. So since some 10 years ago, more than half of the world's population is now urban. Currently, I think it's 56% urban. So if we reach 8 billion people 1 year ago. So now we should have around 4 billion people living in cities. And a lot of that is actually in Asia. So actually 2 billion people are living in cities in Asia, which is 1/4 of the world's population. So in other words, 25% of the world's population is living in cities in Asia, like Jakarta, like us right now. So it is expected to go to 68% or almost 70% by 2050. So that's like 7 out of 10 people in the world in 2050 will be living in cities. However, only less than 3% of the world's land, excluding Antarctica, is actually urbanized. So as you can see in the picture behind the text, you can see a lot of people is living in a very tiny area because cities only have a very small footprint within the world's land mass, which is a good thing. Now, because we leave the rest of the land for nature. Now, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions back and forth, so don't feel like too shy about it. Okay, so this is a very uncomfortable situation. Can anyone tell me some things, 5 things, that should not be happening in this space?
It's a mix of the cooking and then washing.
So what are you doing cooking in the toilet? I think there are some basic unhygienic things going on here, right? So start with the toilet. In front of the toilet is the laundry, the washing machine. You can't even sit straight. Above, you're actually like drying the clothes. Are these clothes ever going to dry?
No.
Next to that, the kitchen. Who's heard of the working triangle in the kitchen? Great. I think she should pass. Whatever subject you learned, the working triangle. So basically, it's storage, preparation, and cooking, right? So here you've got like some preparation, and then you've got the cooking next to the toilet. So you can see there are many activities happening in this one space. This is probably a dramatized example. It is called a subdivided flat. In Hong Kong, which is one of the most expensive property markets in the world, we have people that buying apartment, not to live, because they already have more than one apartment. They're living in these, they buy a new apartment, say 70 square meters. You guys still use square meters, right? Yeah, not imperial. And so 70 square meters, normally it's like 2 or even up to 3 bedrooms. But they would cut it. They would cut the little units into little flats. We call them tong fang, which means cut room, a butchered room. And we would rent them out individually, and they'll also be individually metered for electricity and water, so everyone gets a share. So these subdivided flats are home to 280,000 people in Hong Kong. 280,000 people are living in these type of environments. Some of these are less than the size of a car park space. A car park space is around 3 or 3 by 4 or 3 by 5 meters, 15 square meters. This 100 square feet is 9 square meters. So imagine 3 by 3 meters, and then a family of 4 or 5 will be living in such a space. People would do this because they want to be near a school, or the parents want to be near the work, and so that's why they would live in these super tiny units, just so to be convenient to what they want to do. Right, my apologies for the non-Indonesian rupiah, but accept the fact that your currency has so many zeros that I can't, your number will be very, very long, okay? If it's Thai baht, you times it by 400 USD. What's the currency? What's the exchange rate? Okay, thank you. Yeah, but you can see that number in Indonesian rupiah would be a very long number. So Hong Kong, there is the most expensive property market in the world. This is based on average, so it means there are ones even higher than that and ones below that. Singapore is next. This is a bit dated now. I'm sure some other cities have gone up onto this list. It's trying to show unaffordability, right? As people are urbanizing, value of land has gone up, prices of accommodation has gone up as well. But Hong Kong is clearly the winner, not entirely by choice. So one example of high density urbanism is something called the Kowloon Walled City. The Kowloon Walled City, it is a vertical slum, a slum that went upwards rather than horizontally. So it is now demolished. Back in 1994, it was removed, and to make in advance of the handover. So this is the block. It is an enclave. An enclave, it is a part of another country, but in your own country. So this is actually a piece of China in the middle of Hong Kong. Because it was so far away from China, it's had its own legal setting, which is very much illegal actually. So many illegal things would happen here, because including the construction of these buildings, because these are all illegally constructed. No one approved of these buildings. And because China is not there to police it, so it becomes a kind of no man's land. This is an aerial photograph of the block. So you can see there was actually a military fortress that was there, and that was the wall, hence the walled city. And then these high-rise slums just grew up over time. There's a hole here because there was a temple, and you can't build over the Chinese temple. That temple also doubled up as a school for the children that were living here. So this is a postman trying to find his way to deliver the letters to the people that are living here. So these buildings were some 10 or even 12 stories tall. It would have been taller if it wasn't because of the Kai Tak airport, the old airport that was there, because the planes would be flying over the zone. So anyway, it could have been taller. And because the spaces below were like only 1 meter wide, and you've got all these electric pipes and water pipes hanging over your head. So the spaces were quite dark on the ground level. That's why it was known as the City of Darkness. And that's also because the title of a book, City of Darkness, by these two guys here, they were the photographers who documented this building before it was demolished in 1994. This is the solid void or nollie plan of the ground level. You can see the streets are not aligned, grew up organically. This would have been where the temple was. So some of the spaces inside the Kowloon Walled City, when it was still around, are similar to those butchered flats, those subdivided apartments I talked about before. People living in very tiny units. So here we've got two ladies, and they're eating dinner over a table, which folds down or up, depending on how you see it, because they can free up the space when they're not having dinner. You can see the wall space is used up for, like, hanging the fan, the shrine that's there. Even the TV is on the fridge, because there's so little floor space, you use the wall space to do whatever you need to. Some of the units, however, are not used as apartments, because this is illegal construction. They have some other kinds of activities happening. So you can imagine on like the 5th floor or the 8th floor, there will be a little convenience store selling daily necessities, and the little boy is hanging out there. Or even on another floor and another unit, it could be a hair salon. Things that you normally expect to be on the ground floor are now could be on any unit in these mixed-use apartments, because it's more like a city in a building, a vertical city. And the most open space, since we're talking about public spaces, there is not much public space on the ground, so they reclaim it on the roof. So you can see these children playing on the antennae. And then you've got sunbathing on the roof. And there's one shop owner who likes to own lots of cats. Right, so this is a section drawn by some Japanese researchers who were so fascinated by the Kowloon Walled City. The Japanese researchers even made a model, like a small part of the Kowloon Walled City somewhere in Tokyo, I believe. So they did this drawing to not when the building was still around. I think they did it afterwards. You can't see that, but you can see this. This is... Yeah, I wasn't trying to trick you, don't worry. So you can see the Japanese there. So this was not actually the reality. They did not go through every single unit to see what it was like. The Japanese had to imagine what it was like when it was still built. So you can see the floors are not aligned, because these buildings are built over different periods of time. And some people are even trying to break a hole from one unit into the next. Typical of Hong Kong, they like to hang their clothes out into the public void. And you can see the wall space, hanging things on every inch of wall space. So moving on to a phenomenon that we now have, because Kowloon Walled City has been demolished, 1994, this is 2024, that was 30 years ago now. So We don't have Kowloon Wall City, but we do have something called the composite building. Composite means like a combination, right? So according to the Hong Kong building regulations, we have two types of buildings. Domestic building for like living, residence, and then non-domestic for like offices and shopping malls. And composite building, for the legal definition, it just means domestic and other purpose. But here we can see many other types of purpose as well. So this building here, called Chungking Mansion, famous for a movie called Chungking Express by the famous Hong Kong Chinese director Wong Kar-wai. So this road here, if you've been to Hong Kong, is called Nathan Road. And this is one of the more famous buildings, not for its architectural style, but for the activities that are going on inside that building. Just next to that block is a building called Mirador Mansion, and they have similar things going on in there as well. So I'll just take you to the section, which is not an actual section of the building, more like a diagram of a section. So in this section here, you can see things that don't really belong to each other. So you've got like those subdivided flats, those tiny units I talked about, guest houses. You guys all know what is a guest house, right? A hostel or a backpackers. Kung Fu school, you've got these things in blue, which I'll talk about, and these commercial things. So inside a typical composite building, you've got these really strange mix of users. But let's try to understand that. So the first thing is the Kung Fu school. So you all heard of Bruce Lee, right? Hands up who's met Bruce Lee before. Good. Bruce Lee, probably an actor. Now, Bruce Lee was taught by a guy called Yip Man, and he's had a style called Wing Chun, which is, you may have seen movies about it. So this is not Bruce Lee's school, but his style. And the Westerners, white people, they want to learn this martial art, and they come to Hong Kong to do like 2 weeks intensive. So they can get an instructor's certificate, so when they go back to their Western country, they are legally titled to be an instructor because it was certified by a Grand Master of that style. And so Western people do that, and they need to stay somewhere. They need a place to live for those 2 weeks intensive. So they partner with the guest house. So the guest house or the hostel and the martial arts school would do a martial art and accommodation package, which would then be marketed by the travel agent downstairs. So this is a kind of invisible relationship between these various things. The blue things, this is where it gets even more strange. Now, in Hong Kong, it's famous for like the 24-hour or 48-hour layover or stopover, because it's popular stopover from people going from the southern hemisphere to the north, or from east to west or west to east. And so people there are on their holiday, and they go into these composite buildings to see a tailor store, like making suits, by Pakistan, normally Pakistani people, very famous over time. And you go there to choose your style, choose your color, and then get your measurement, of course, and then you order 2 suits, and that order will get picked up by the little units upstairs. Remember, this is a composite building. So the units upstairs, which you expect apartment units, but they're actually like a tailor factory or a fabric shop. The fabric shop will give it to the fabric to the sleeve shop, and they just make the sleeve. And they become very good at making the sleeve. And then the sleeve will get the buttons, and then it'll all get assembled into the factory. And then within 24 hours or 48 hours, your suit could even be delivered to your hotel room, and then off you go for your conference in your next destination. So what looks like a really chaotic mix of activities is there is actually invisible things, relationships happening between them. The last is just to do with the tourists or the travelers. So you've got the guest houses at the top, and then you've got like cyber cafes. Hands up who's heard of cyber cafe before? Yeah. At a time when there was no Wi-Fi, people still need to go to a cyber cafe to check your email and stuff like that. They still operate, most likely playing like internet games and stuff like that. Restaurants, currency exchange, travel agents. So all of these work with the guest house to like market deals and discounts and whatnot. So these last 3 slides, we're trying to show you that even though you have a very great mix of activities, there are sets of informal, invisible relationships happening between them. They look chaotic from the outside, but it's actually very orderly from the inside. Here are some of the photographs. And actually, when you go in, this is exactly what you'll see. Just like a complete mess of really different things. Guest houses, the Kung Fu school that I talked about, and on the ground level, like travelers' shops. Here's the cyber cafe. Here's a hair salon. This is one of the guest houses. The guest houses, by the way. This is not like one building, one hostel. You can get many hostels inside one floor, and then many floors, so you have many hostels. You've heard of Booking.com, right? So Booking.com, the first 3 pages, if you go by price, low to high, the first 3 pages would be hostels in either the Chungking Mansion or the Mirador Mansion, because they're the cheapest in town. And then you'll see the address is the same. The address of all these, like the first 3 pages of accommodation is the same, because they're on different parts of the same 2 buildings, which is quite strange. So people probably will get a bit lost. Of course, you've also got something that looks like an apartment unit, but it's been advertised as a restaurant. And then those tailor or the garment making industry. So you've got units which are doing the tailor store on the ground level, and then the factory above. This has been published, and you are welcome to have a look at it. It's called Unexpected Juxtapositions, the title of my book chapter. Juxtapositions mean things next to each other, right? And unexpected, because these things, you probably don't expect them to be next to each other. You can search for that on Google. So this leads me to the next topic, which is about a particular urban block which you'll find throughout Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, we call the bottom part of the building the podium, which is like normally the first 3 or 4 stories. You can build up to 100% of the site area. And then you have towers on top of that. An extreme example is that you can actually have 1 podium and 20 towers on top of 1 podium. So this is just a very conservative number, 2 towers. So orange could be like the residential tower, and podium would be like the shopping mall. So in Hong Kong, we have the double-decker buses, the 2-story buses, like in London. And so we'll have like a footbridge connecting the top story of the podium from one building to the next. Firstly, these buildings were built at different times. Okay? So this was probably built at one time by one developer, that was built another time by another developer. So most likely, the floors are actually not going to be straight. Most likely, that footbridge might be like a little ramp as well, because if you're in floor to floor, it's like 5 meters here and 4 or 4.5 meters here, then obviously you'll need to have some way of ramping. Now, there's a question that I normally ask to the audience. Now that you don't have to walk on the ground level to get from building to building, you can walk on this, what we call streets in the sky. So if this was a department store, you guys know department store, right? Department store, every level selling something different. So what would they sell on this level? Sorry? Did you say food? Yeah. High five. That is the correct answer. Because how come people are becoming more intelligent these days? I normally trick people with this. So, department store. Rule number 1, the ground floor is cosmetics. Okay, that's inherited from the UK model. But the food is normally sold in the upper level because they're not worth as much as like expensive clothes, and so just put it up in the top level so people are not visiting. But here you want to put food because people are now walking along this level as a street in the sky. And food, because you can impulse buy. You see it, you're hungry, and then you buy it, right? And it's not expensive. So it's normally snack food, not like restaurant food. And so that's what you're trying to do there. So what I'm trying to show in this image is things that normally happen on the ground level can now happen above. And then that continues. In Hong Kong, you can have like 1 kilometer of these elevated street networks, going from like shopping mall to department store, etc. You're no longer just walking on the ground. And Hong Kong, we also have like heavy rain, very hot, very humid. So these elevated streets in the sky become a new way of using the city. Now, what I showed you was just that block, right? And then let's try to extend it over to another district. Let's just say you live in one of these orange apartments on the 5th floor, and then you need to go to work. So you just take the train down, take the lift down. You might pick up Starbucks or McDonald's for breakfast, and then you would take the subway, we call it the MTR, Mass Transit Railway, and you'll just take it all the way to your office building. Your office building where you work is most likely on top of another MTR. So you just go up. And when you finish work, you just go the reverse. Come down, take the train back, and then on your way back up your apartment, you might get your groceries or pick up your laundry or something like that. And then the next day, and so on and so forth. You hardly need to go out because your transit is directly below where you live, and the transit is directly below where you work. The only time you need to go out is probably just for the lunch break. So that's to see the idea that not only does the city, we tend to think the city as different buildings divided by roads, and you have to wait to cross the road or get from one building to the other. Think instead of the city as an interconnected building, the city as one large building, and that the actual city is made up of these very large interconnected buildings together. So the previous diagram I made, and then so happens I found this one on the internet, and it basically confirms what I was saying, right? You have the MTR on the underground, you have a podium, commercial podium, and you can have residential or office towers. And that's the other direction of the section. This is what we call a rail village. A rail village. Because like you guys have kampungs, right? Even though they're not like in traditional, modern buildings are still called kampungs. In the same way we have villages, the term we use is chun, and we still use the village to describe like a modern cluster of apartment buildings. And these villages are on top of or next to train stations. So here are some numbers, 42%. So that's 4 out of 10 households. 75%, so that's 3 out of 4 commercial or office spaces, are only within 500 meter radius of a train station. 500 meters. How many minutes of walking is that? Has anyone walked 500 meters? 500 meters. Hands up, 10 minutes. Hands up, 5 minutes. It's in between. Roughly in between. It depends if you have traffic lights and other things. So because 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters is roughly 15 minutes. So 500 meters should be around 7.5. But you're more accurate to say 10 because it's radius, not the actual distance. That's the displacement. So within 500 meter radius of all the train stations in Hong Kong, you would find 4 out of 10 of the households and 75% of the commercial spaces. So if your office is not near a train station, then you're probably trying to get, it'll be more harder for you to get people to come visit because most of the office spaces are just 500 meter radius from a train station. Right, so before I move on, this is a topic called cities without ground, which is that diagram I drew before. The idea that Hong Kong is not to be experienced with the ground as the absolute reference point. In here, and I think in Bangkok as well, the ground Like if you want to go from one place to the next place, most likely you are thinking of what? Car, motorbike, or on foot, and then and a bus, right? Whereas in Hong Kong, the ground is not the absolute reference. You can go above ground or below ground. So in that book, which they, by the way, they called it a Hong Kong guidebook, which means the idea that you can experience the city more volumetrically. So there are underground train stations which connect to escalators, which then go above ground as well. And the longest escalator is 800 meters, by the way. Not a single one, many parts broken up together. So this is the central train station in Hong Kong. We have two lines, the blue line and the red line. The blue area is the paid area where you have to pay with the ticket. The yellow is the public space where you can go in and out. And so that means you can go down one escalator and then walk underground and then pop up another escalator. You have these underground networks. So that's before was the 3D view. This is the 2D image overlaid with the city on top. So you can come down here, walk underground and pop up here. But it also means that these are all entrances, right? You can also get into the train station from many different points. You're not like, there's like one train station and only one grand entrance. The idea of going through the city means you're going through the network of the train stations. You can go enter the train station from any point according to your convenience. And you can get out from any point. And this train station here is connected to the Hong Kong station, which is the one that takes you to the airport. This is another underground network. This one is much longer, about like 1 kilometer or even longer. So these little blue-green symbols here, those are the entrance and exit. Many, many ways of getting in and out of the station. On the superimposed map, it goes as far as Tsim Sha Tsui East, all the way to the cultural area on the west side. That's the train station. But even the underground networks go way beyond the area of the train station. And all of these little letters, like L4, L5, these are where the exits are. So if it's heavy rain or you don't want to weather the heat, you can just go underground. So that leads me to the title of another book, which is called The Making of Hong Kong, From Vertical to Volumetric. So before I said cities are mainly like horizontal, but Hong Kong is not only vertical, but also horizontal and vertical combined, hence the idea of volumetric. Right, I don't need to use your one. The Bangkok one is just as bad. Actually, I'm sure the Bangkok one is probably worse because car ownership in Thailand is very, very high. So according to the Bangkok Post, Bangkok has one of the worst traffic jams in the world. Number two, second worst world in the world. It's about like Mexico City is number 1. But of course it changes. Coming with traffic congestion is also air pollution. 60% of the pollution in Bangkok or in Thailand is mainly coming from the traffic. So that's why these two are related. And this, of course, changes almost every second with the automatic monitoring. And so this is a slide that I've taken from one of my colleagues because now we're going to move from dense cities to transit, the second topic. So this lecture is essentially about transit, about the need for mass public transportation. But the first half of the lecture, I just talked about like tight housing, living conditions, walking across bridges and stuff like that. Because the most sustainable energy is to use no energy at all. So if you can get from point A to point B by walking, then that's more sustainable than any other transportation method you can think about. So the first half of that lecture was about how to encourage compact cities that encourage walking, basically. Either you're just going down the lift to do your grocery or just going down further to take the train. So you don't need to take a car or a motorbike. But of course, not everywhere you can get to without motorized transport. So we'll need to think of the next step, which is mass public transportation. So according to UN Habitat, the United Nations Human Settlement Program, they're saying that mass public transit is the key to low carbon and inclusive cities. Now, Hong Kong's MTR network is on time 99.9% of the time. That means you need to take this train 1,000 times before you get delayed one time. It is meant to be amongst the most efficient in the world. So even if you miss a train, there should only be 2 or 3 minutes before the next train if you're in the more busier part of the network. Right, this statistic is a bit biased. Top 10 cities with the best public transport in the world. Most of these cities are in Europe, okay? Very good public transportation in these European cities. London with the tube, Paris with the metro, okay? You can see they're around about 60 to low 70%, with Zurich at 73%. Hopping over to Japan, Tokyo. Yes, it is very good, but it's only 66% only, still top 10. Because, hands up who's been to Japan before? Yep, so if you've been to Tokyo, you notice if you want to change from one line to the next line, you have to get out of the train station, pay off, then walk out and find the next train station, if you can find it, because it's going to be outside, right? And then pay into the next one. The interchange is not that convenient. Singapore, which competes with Hong Kong, is also quite high, but not as high as Hong Kong itself. So Hong Kong is the city with the best public transport in the world. I know I'm bragging, but then I'm not living there anymore. So the main thing, what makes it so good, so I'll need to tell you that, right? And the next half of the lecture is about that. It is based on 5 indicators, this measurement. Infrastructure, you need the infrastructure. Social impact, by that I mean those exits at the different train stations, which are all like lettered, A, B, and C. They're also like meeting points for your friends. So this is say I'm having dinner with my friend. I can say, we'll meet at exit A or exit B at a particular station. It's like a wayfinder or a reference. There is more than just transport. It's also a way of living or using the city. Market attractiveness, system efficiency. System efficiency means what in terms of train stations? The most popular thing we'll probably be thinking of is frequency. How often does the train come? And does it come on time? And then innovation. So these 5 factors help to contribute to this statistic. This is the Bangkok BTS system. It's been around for 10 or so years, but it hasn't really expanded because it's too expensive for a lot of the majority of the population, low-income population, which still have to take the bus. So UN Habitat is saying that under the right conditions, public transit, so that's mass public transit. We're not talking about like motorbike taxis here. Mass public transit can promote efficient distribution of people and economic activity in the city. I think our dean here this morning talked about the people, how the trains can distribute activity. And actually, remember when I showed 42% of the households living 500 meters away from a train station, 75% of the commercial spaces 500 meters from a train station? Because if you can put your activity where the train stations are, people are going to come there, right? And people are going to go from there. So where you have train station is where you have a concentration of where people are living and where people are working. This, of course, is assuming the train station comes first. The train network comes first before the development of the city, rather than you have the city develop and then come the train afterwards. But the two would affect each other. Right, some basic facts. The Hong Kong population has slowed down, but nevertheless, it's around 7 million people, still hovering over 7 million people. 88%, which is almost 90% of the journeys in Hong Kong are taken with public transportation. I asked one of my students in urban design at Thammasat, can you find me another city with a higher rateage than that? Well, firstly, if you do, it's probably almost like a utopia, because it's almost like 100% people taking public transportation. So 88% is very high already. The public transport system includes the train, the MTR, trams, buses, minibuses, taxis, and ferries. It actually carries 4.29 million passengers. 4.29 divided by the 7.4 is around 57%. So 57% of the population of Hong Kong is taking the MTR network every day. That's a very high number. This is the current MTR network of Hong Kong. Not sure if there's anything that's been proposed. I haven't even used some of these myself. So the white areas, coverage of a train network is very important, and it's covering most of Hong Kong. It's not covering this white patch here because that's a very big mountain, and then in the new territories there's also another very big mountain. This area here is probably the most disconnected, but generally it's following the coastline, right? And that's where human settlements are. That's where the cities are. Now, you will see these little white circles. Those are the stations, right? But then there are these little ones here. They're the slightly elongated circle. Those are called interchange stations, where you can change from the red line to the green line, red line to the blue or the light blue line, etc. Those ones are very important because they help you to get from one side of the city to another side of the city without needing to take a feeder bus or something like that. These interchange stations, unlike the one in Tokyo, they are connected to each other. So all you have to do is to walk out of the train station and you see the train on the other side and you're like running to catch that next train, because that's literally how connected the interchanges are. Sometimes you may have to go down or up one level depending on which direction you're going to. Some interchange stations are bigger, like they connect 3 lines together. Another little interesting thing here is a thing called Airport Express, or it's actually the in-town check-in. The Airport Express is this teal line, the dark green one, that goes from Hong Kong City to the airport. But there are 2 stations here, the Hong Kong station and the Kowloon station. These 2 stations have a unique function. It is called in-town check-in. In-town check-in. It means that you don't need to go to the airport to check in your luggage and get your boarding pass. You can do it here. You can drop your luggage there, get your boarding pass, and then go around the city, enjoy your day, and when the time comes, catch the Airport Express to the airport, which should only take around 20 to 30 minutes. So actually, I mean, I was working here in Sheung Wan. I lived here. So in the morning, I had to go back to New Zealand. I think it was for my PhD graduation. So I went back so I took my luggage by the blue line to Hong Kong station, got my boarding pass, went to work that day, and then at 4 p.m. left to the Hong Kong station, and then just took the Airport Express. So it's very convenient for tourists and locals alike to have an in-town check-in. Right, moving on to the transit part of the lecture and why the whole density and transit thing is connected. So, train systems. Who's paying for them? Firstly, if you're going to have if your city wants to have a new train system, can it operate with just one train station? Of course not. Where's the train going to? You need at least multiple train stations. Actually, you need almost the entire line of all the stations in operation before your train can even start to operate, right? And it means there's a lot of money. That money can come from the government, or as in, I think, your case, you can also have money coming from international agencies like JICA. But nevertheless, it is a lot of money coming from someone. If it's government money, that means that money is actually whose money? Taxpayers' money, right? So In Hong Kong, we do not need to borrow money from other people. We also do not need the government's money, and which means we do not need taxpayers' money. The Hong Kong trade system, the company that owns it, it's its own company, and it can find its own way to generate the money to make the train system. And it does this through what is called the R&P model, rail and property. Probably just skip to the next one. So normally, if you want to make a new train system, you will be taking a huge risk. You need to spend a lot of money to make the train line. If you're going underground, you need to dig a hole, for many kilometers, make all the train stations, have all the train stations operating, and trains and their maintenance, right? And you need to spend that money before the first day it even opens. There's a lot of risk involved because firstly, most likely, if you are a train company and you are going to have a train system, you need to earn the money back, right? And you're going to earn the money back most likely from customers, people using the train. And you can't make it too expensive, otherwise no one's going to use it. So that's why there is a huge risk in terms of how many people is going to use the train when it opens. So the R&P or rail and property model allows the train company in Hong Kong to do projects quickly and not compete for public funds. So how do they do that? So the R&P model is integrated with the whole mixed-use building that I talked about before. The buildings are designed with a podium, normally 3 stories. They'll have shopping centers, cinemas, recreation, whatever. And on top of the podium, you could have many high-rise buildings, offices, or most likely residential. Now, I did say Hong Kong property market is the most expensive in the world, right? So what the train station does is to partner with private developers. Before I go on, TOD, who's heard of that? Who's heard of TOD before? Fantastic concept, right? Absolutely not. Because TOD just means, let's develop a train station. And then the value of the land is going to be increased because people are coming to this train station and they're going from this train station. So people are coming here. The land is going to be expensive because there's more need for this land. But what are you going to do? Are you going to develop your building after? Well, by then it's already too expensive. So what the Hong Kong train company does is to do a partnership. The train company would partner with private developers. So let's just say I am the train company and I go, hey, Aklish, I'm going to do a new train station here. And say you are a property developer, apartments. And I go, do you want to start working together? Because when my train station opens, you are going to need people that come to your apartments, and then we can do work together, right? You get money because people want to buy these apartments, and I'll get money because we will share the profits. So that's exactly what happens in Hong Kong. It's essentially a model of TOD, but working a little bit differently. So the government of Hong Kong would give land development rights to the train company. You need that. You need land to develop a train, right? Obviously, especially if it's underground. You get land development rights. Because the station is underground, it means the land above is going to be quite valuable. And then the MTR company is obviously going to give not the Hong Kong government, but the people of Hong Kong that the government serves, a railway system. That's the simple part. The more interesting thing is happening here. The MTR company would invite the private developers, schools, commercial, residential property developers to say, let's do a partnership. And then when my train station is under construction, Aklish's 20 apartment buildings are also under construction. And when everything is built, everything is ready to be in operation from the beginning. And we just share the profit. Aktish is going to get rich very easily because he's selling things in the most expensive property development market in the world. So you just give me a little bit and I'll be fine because I just needed to develop another train station somewhere else. And so this profit sharing model means that MTR company does not need taxpayers' money. In fact, the MTR company doesn't even need you to take the train. Even if Hong Kong's train network got 0 passengers, the MTR company will still be in a profit. They don't need you to take the train, and we'll still be in a profit because the money comes from the property development, which is the most expensive in the world. But because the MTR company does not need you to take the train, the MTR company can control the price, and it can make it very, very cheap. Okay? And that's why many people are able to take the train every day. That explains why 4 out of 7 million are taking the train every day, and 88% of the journeys every day are using public transportation. Because it's very cheap, but also because most of your office buildings and apartment buildings are within the 500-meter radius of a train station. So where you are coming from and where you're going to is most likely next to a train station or directly above the train station. So it encourages you to take the train, and because it's cheap, it encourages you even more. So buildings sit over half of the Hong Kong train system stations with some 13 million square meters of floor area. The train companies partners with private developers to build properties, and we can share the profit in different ways. So the whole thing here is about land value capture. Capture the value of the land before it becomes expensive. And that way people are able to work with you, and then we share the profit. The MTR company can generate funds for new projects and do the maintenance as well. It does not need government subsidy or loan. Does not even need ridership. So coming towards the end, it's very important to have these compact cities or buildings connected by footbridge to each other, by footbridge, and then connected to the train station, because you want to be near the train station, and the building should also be like mixed use, so that way you can walk to whatever you need to get to. What we're saying here is that the train stations or the MTR, which has a shopping mall normally connected to it, are not just places to walk through. Don't see the transit. Don't see public transportation only for public transportation. Don't see public transportation just to solve the traffic congestion problem. See public transportation as a way of changing how we use the city. So as we are going to that train station, we could be going to the supermarket, picking up the laundry or something like that. And then, or people coming from the train station, they can do, pick up food on their way back to their apartments. So as many cities have become, have more population, like Jakarta, and you start to think, or Bangkok for that matter, and you start to think, we need to address the traffic congestion issue. We need a new public transit now. It's going to be very expensive, and there's a lot of risk because you probably borrowed the money from somewhere so that you can pay it off, hopefully, with passengers. But as systems get bigger, serve more people, most cities continue to lose money. For more than 30 years, the Hong Kong MTR company, and here's the interesting thing, the Hong Kong MTR company is one of the most biggest property developers in Hong Kong. A train company is one of the biggest property developers in Hong Kong because of the whole profit sharing thing, because of the RMP model. You do not explain the train company, you expect the train company to just make train stations and get money from the passengers. But the train company is working with private developers, owning the land because the government's giving it to them, and then becoming a property developer in its own right. So for more than 30 years, this RMP model has provided excellent transit, vibrant neighborhoods, people are close to each other, schools, trains, everything, and provided opportunities for businesses while preserving open space. The whole system operates on a self-sustaining basis. So we don't need passengers to pay off our loans or the money that we used, right? We just partner with the private developers and we get the money back. And that money, we use it to make more train stations and more property. And then with that money, we make more train stations and more property. So it's a self-sustaining system without the need for taxpayers, without the need for your money or government money. So in summary, the whole RMP model, rail and property model, means it encourages commercial and residential development to happen with train stations. Sharing the profits, and then it helps to pay for new investment in transit, and then it just makes cities more livable, with, easing the traffic congestion on the ground. This picture here, hands up if you think this picture is on the ground level. Hands up, you think this is above ground. So this is actually the rooftop. This is the rooftop, the roof garden. And these things here, these are skylights to bring the light down. This is a very big shopping mall called the Elements Mall. Just behind the photograph, I didn't take it. It's the tallest building in Hong Kong. And you've got these very tall high-rise buildings on top of it. A new ground on top of the ground. So this slide here is trying to show that not only should we be thinking of the train, but think of other kinds of public transit, like the double-decker bus, not the ice cream truck, ignore that. The ferry, the tram, the public light bus, which is the 16-seater minibus, and of course the train. They all work together on one card, which is very important because convenience. You don't want to have many different cards to pay many different transportation systems. You just need the one card. This one card can pay for all of those things I said, trams, trains, ferries, even 7-Eleven and even McDonald's. You can use the same card. So 3 C's: convenience, choice, and cheap. Convenience means you can choose which train method of transportation. Choice, so convenience and choice are together, isn't it? Convenience means that you should be close from where you are to one mode of transport. And then cheap as well. And cheap also keeps that choice open. So 3 C's to keep in mind when you are developing public transit networks. So this comes to a slide which those who are familiar with were probably thinking about for a while, which is the idea of a compact city. I show this at the end because this talks about everything I just said. This is based on Paris, which is still historical industrial age city, post-industrial age city. The idea is that from your home, you can get to your school, your work, to your groceries, to see the doctor, and other things, your daily necessities within 15 minutes. 15 minutes. In Jakarta and Bangkok, we should probably keep it to only 5 or 10 minutes. Too hot. Reality is that the idea that these things should be within arm's reach. You should not need to take a car to get to these things. That's the idea of the compact 15-minute city, moving away from car centricity to human-centric sustainable environments. But there is one point here, one point along this circle, which is the odd one out. One of those points does not belong. Can anyone guess what that is? I purposely skipped that one. Reality is that not everything is in arm's reach. Sometimes you have to take the train or a car to go to your concert hall or a museum or a university, right? Not everything is within arm's reach. So that's why within 15 minutes, you should have a point of transit. This is the escape pod. This is how you escape from your 15-minute neighborhood. So that way you can go to another place, to your actual destination. And the idea is that it doesn't have to be 15 minutes, especially in Hong Kong where you can just go down the lift. And it should be a mass transit, not just like a motorbike taxi. So just getting around ideally should actually be directly underneath the home, but not all homes can be directly above a train station. So again, that 500-meter radius thing. So these are the 5 Ds as proposed about compact cities. Firstly is density. Density does not mean overcrowding. Please be careful. Density does not mean overcrowding. Overcrowding is too much density, right? We're talking about sustainable density. Design. By that we mean pedestrian design. Designing the cities, like what I showed before, you can have hair salons, martial arts schools, everything within the same building or connected by bridges. Designing your neighborhood so that things are with a walkable distance. Diversity. Diversity of use and income. So it's not like one area where all the rich people live, another area with all the low income. Singapore is doing this really good. Mixed diversity and mixing uses. Commerce, leisure, education, etc. The last 2 things relate to transit. Destination. You should have landmarks within your own city, like a museum, a university, a shopping mall, etc. There are key landmarks for people to come to your neighborhood. But not every neighborhood will have everything that you need. So you need to get out. That's the escape mechanism. You should also be 400 to 800 meters away from a point of mass transit so that you can get to your final destination. So to wrap up, the compact city idea, 15-minute city, does not mean your whole city is 15 minutes or 1 kilometer in distance. That's not the right thinking. Think of it as your neighborhood is the 15-minute neighborhood, and that you can catch the train to get to another neighborhood, which is also 15 minutes because everything is within next to each other. So if I go, this might take me too long to go all the way back. I should include, there it is. Oh no. Here it is. Where's the train network? Here it is. So these stations here are conveniently 1 kilometer away from each other. They are 1 15-minute city away from each other. So if each district or each train station, which has its own neighborhood, is its own 15 minutes neighborhood, then you've connected, the train connects all the 15 neighborhoods together to create an integrated network of 15-minute neighborhoods. So the city is not 1 15-minute city, but the city is made up of a network of little 15-minute neighborhoods connected by transit. So as Jakarta is having its own MRT network expanding, I think now is a good time to start thinking how we can adopt the 15-minute principle as well as work with the transit system in a more sustainable way. So that comes to the close of the second topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adrian Low. It's very absolutely insightful, I guess. The very common sense in Indonesia that we have here, because as you may know that our station is not really integrated with another facilities, properties, business, retails, and there's no such thing. But in Japan, as we probably most of the students have visited Japan and Thailand, most of the major, not every station in Japan has integrated with another properties or business, but they make people go to station not only to connect, but also to hanging out. So they spend a lot of time there. They spend a lot of money there. So the business is, as you may say, is a self-sustaining business. It's a. Can you think about a transport here doesn't need passengers to maintain the business? They don't need, because it's self-sustaining. There is a lot of things going on in one place. They created a station for another poses businesses, retails, and properties, apartment. But here in Indonesia, we don't really have much of a apartment, a vertical settlement as the Hong Kong facing right now, because here in Indonesia, most of the people chooses housing detached to the land, and it's more popular than ever. So the distance between the station to the other station is not 15 minutes away. So there is a quite different a problem that we are coming from the roots, the kind of problem. Okay, maybe we have a very limited time, Dr. Adriana. So we will have our responder by Ibu Riri, maybe, please. Thank you. Ibu Riri.
Okay, thank you, Mas Aklis. Very interesting presentation, Dr. Lu. So, especially when you show us about Kowloon, because we have the same cases here in Kalianyar. So, in Kalianyar area in West Jakarta, same with Universitas Trisakti area near here, we have a 2-story house measuring 6 and 12 meters, accommodates 6 families, and total maybe 23 people in that house. So that's I think similar with Kowloon, but Kowloon world is demolished, but still in Kalianyar. So that's different between Kowloon and Kalianyar. So what's intriguing about vertical housing in Hong Kong now, especially in the division of zones based on floor heights. It's correct because in our Kampung Aquarium that you visit yesterday, maybe you can show each unit have a small area that they can sell something for their daily life. So maybe that's why I would like to ask you, how about the settlement area in vertical housing in Hong Kong? The other thing is, just like we discussed this morning, we will organize a summer camp on maybe June in Kampung Aquarium. So we invited you and your student to join us in summer camp in June. So maybe next Mas Raflis and Mbak Lisa will talk with you too. And lastly, for the students enroll in settlement and urban planning courses, you saw Dr. Low presentation. So about the principles of complexity that offer a value insight that can be applied and explored within your design studio. So that's our response, and thank you for your presentation. Mas Aklis, back to you.
Thank you, Mbak Riri. Please, Dr. Rianle.
Thank you, Ririk, for your fantastic comment and question. Thank you for inviting us. As I mentioned, I believe I'm doing a studio now that actually looks into common spaces for low-income families. So Kampung Aquarium is a good case study of how you can still maintain the traditional way of life, even though it was like on the ground level, but above ground in those pockets of spaces that you mentioned, like the split level in between the levels where the people have like sitting outside or children are still playing, which is a very interesting phenomenon. It's actually the vertical city, but vertical, like a vertical kampung, right? The idea of taking things that you would normally do on the ground level, but now above the ground. And what makes it even more interesting is that area is actually, the split level is actually open open on both sides. It's like naturally ventilated, so it has a sense of a kind of outdoor within an indoor space. In Hong Kong's social housing, we tend not to have much public space. Every square inch is very valuable. So our corridors are quite tight, but we do have some innovation back in the 1960s and 70s in the Second World War, where there was mass numbers of migrants coming in from China, and we needed to do the housing for large numbers of people. There was a lot of innovation back then, and I can show you some examples of the old social housing. We call it HKHA, Hong Kong Housing Authority, the government housing. So trying to put as many people into as many apartments as possible. And there was still some good innovation. Now in the more private developed markets, there not as much innovation involved. They just do like a kind of shell, and then the interior designer kind of just takes over. So in terms of like common spaces, it's probably looking more at the social housing. And there are some interesting ones there as well. Like, I think there was also like a split level one, like around the staircase, and just lift or stair core. Yeah, I think I chose most of those things that you talked about. But thank you for inviting us, and hopefully maybe we can, in our discussion later, do some collaboration about that.
Really? Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Adriana. We're happy to having you for the next summer camp in June, Dr. Adriana. Okay, maybe for the student, we would like to also invite the student to ask more questions about what we are just discussed. This is very important for us now that our country are very much developing more and more station and public transportation, so that you don't have so that you have more comprehensive understanding of what we are going to do, what we have to do, because station is not only to connect trains, but it also accommodate a lot of businesses, a lot of partnership properties, and also very much thing. Maybe for the students, I invited. Okay. Mas Amar, silakan, Mas Amar.
Assalamualaikum. I want to ask, Jakarta is a big city with a lot of people. How would we be able to provide better compact accommodation without making Jakarta look like Kowloon? Thank you. That's it.
Without making it look like Kowloon. Yeah. Kowloon, the massive this case, the city, Kowloon city, is it correct? Okay. Ya, Mas, kalau saya tidak salah mendengar tadi, bagaimana membuat Jakarta untuk tidak terlihat seperti Kowloon? Ya, seperti itu ya. So we might have the questions was about how to create a solution that probably look like the solution that we just presented here in Jakarta case, without making it the Jakarta city looks like Kowloon city.
Thanks very much for the question. I did mention in the lecture that there are two approaches to this, and normally this can be done if you have the train station first, and then you can develop the building around it. But if you have the development already, and then you insert the train station, then one issue is gentrification. So the things that are of lower value, or things that are already there, might become of lower value, and then someone might try to redevelop it. And so this is an issue of redevelopment. So it's not like TOD, it's TORD, transit and redevelopment. And I think that's something you guys should be really looking into. Having said that, Hong Kong is going through that as well. And it's money wins. Unfortunately, yeah, we have a street in Hong Kong famous for the dried seafood, lots of cats, and that area is going through a bit of gentrification now, because a new train station has popped up, and the renting of that area is now gone up, and so they can't just survive there. And so identity of a particular place, which is really what it's about, isn't it? How can you give the public transit facility while still maintaining or preserving the cultural identity? So Hong Kong does not have the solution for you. Don't learn from Hong Kong in that case. But yeah, it's an interesting topic, and there's no clear solution on that. Yeah.
Every place has its own
Yeah.
context and solution. Yes. Is that Mas Amar? Yeah. So we have our own problem. One of the major things that he highlighted is we should provide an access first before we develop the facilities, so that maybe I will talk to Indonesia for a bit. Dr. Adrian, please excuse us. Pada dasarnya secara pragmatikal kita sudah paham ya bahwa harusnya secara ideal kita bisa merancang akses dulu ya daripada fasilitas begitu, agar tata kotanya rapi gitu ya, sehingga apa yang dihadapi Hong Kong itu memang jelas cukup berbeda dari segi culture. Kemudian ada imigrasi dari China in early 1960s something. Mumpung sekarang memang sedang ada development station, mungkin memang harus di highlight bagi semua perancana bahwa kita semua harus bermula dari akses untuk menjadikan kota lebih rapi. We have to start from the accessibility before maybe max facility, so that everything becomes more efficient than ever. So we can calculate the ATA. In Jakarta, it's almost impossible for you to, get in place in the right exact time as we appointed, because the ETA is just not calculated at all. It's almost impossible in the traffic, even the public transport. Sometimes there's a problem. Sometimes there is even as simple as the card tapping, it's just sometimes it's just problematic. In Japan, you just have to just go all the way without really touching it. But in Indonesia, you just have to wait for 2 seconds. You can imagine with the line would be a lot of minutes needed. Okay, maybe another questions from the students or the lecturer or invited lecturer. Okay, Mas Hendri, silahkan.
Hi. So my question is that we here in Indonesia recently government have been constructing a new capital city called IKN. Maybe you will have known it. And government said that it is the problem solver for overpopulated and environmental problems, also pollution problems. My question is that what is your opinion about it? Do we still need to construct a new city, or we can also solve the problems that I mentioned in Jakarta with the methods that you have been explained? For example, MTR, MTRD, and etc. etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mas Hendri. Dr. Adrian.
Thanks for the question. I didn't get the case, his reference.
Oh, okay. So he was talking about the new capital city that we're building.
Nusantara.
Yeah, it's
okay. Now I get the reference. Okay. Nusantara. Now is the time to do what I just suggested. Don't do the development first and then get the traffic jam like Bangkok and then try to fix it with a very belated transit system. Just do it together. The answer to that question is actually something basically is my conclusion. So you've heard of TOD, right? T means transit, D means development. I'm not saying DOT, development oriented transit. I'm actually saying T plus D, because rail is the transit and D is property development. The RMP that Hong Kong is using is actually simply swapping the two, the T and the D with R and P. It's the same thing. Transit plus development.
Mas Hendri. So again, highlighted today, we will have to design the accessibility first, basically, before the development of the facilities around it. So Nusantara is the perfect example for us to start from the zero. He also comparing Dr. Ajunlo. Is it better for us to start everything in Nusantara from zero, or to just fix what we have here in Jakarta? Because Jakarta is there is a lot of problematic in Jakarta, and especially from the transportation. He also mentioning about the comparison of efficiency, probably, if I'm not mistaken. What do you think about that, Dr. Ajunlo?
I think the question is too rich for us to answer.
Right,
And
right.
Your question that you raised was something I talked about 1 month ago when I was in Singapore, where we actually invited Nusantara Capital Authority to, and they were talking about that. And one of the panelists, we talked about the idea between one of the panelists. We talked about how Jakarta, like Bangkok, is a city that's already established, and it has its own inherited problems. Let's call that like a brownfield condition, a city that is already has its own issues, and how can we improve on that? Versus, for public transit, of course, versus what we call tabula rasa, a greenfield, blank slate, clean slate, like Nusantara. And clearly the way you would address this issue for both will be different. But I think there's lots of academic papers that can be written about this playoff between the new capital and the existing capital, and how property development and transit can work in this case. I think, but the biggest issue here is, should you guys move at all? And so, what worst case scenario, but would Jakarta become a secondary city? Or would it be more like Australia, where Canberra is the administrative capital, but it's no way the largest city, and Sydney and Melbourne are still the largest city? So in that case, you need to invest in public transport, and then just let Nusantara be the administrative capital only. So this is not like a city model, this is like a country model. Yeah, learning from another country and how it works. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Denley, for the explanation. I think we reach our maximum time. Yes. All right. We'd like to deeply deliver our gratitude, Dr. Denley, for the very much interesting and very useful knowledge that he has shared to us. I think we are facing the same a current problem related to what you just shared, and we wish the knowledge could be very useful for all of us to implement in the future. Also for the design studio, also I think every student has their stimulator now to do what's next. Okay, again, thank you very much, Dr. Adrianlo. I would invite everyone to give applause to Dr. Adrianlo. Thank you very much. Okay, I would give back the time and floor to the Master of Ceremony of the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the insight that you shared to us. To all participants, thank you for coming to this international guest lecture. We hope that today's event brings many benefits to all of you.
Now there will be a souvenir and certificate for Dr. Adrian Low from Faculty of Civil Engineering and Planning and the Architecture Department. Please, Mr. Hadi, you can go forward to give the souvenir, and Mr. Arif can hand the certificate.
Saya ini aja ya. Iya.
Iya Pak, yang foto siapa? Ininya dikasih ke Pak Hadi.
Mungkin itu aja ya, simbolis ya.
Baik.
Yeah, so you can put. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Yes, thanks.
Apologize for any mistake in our words and action. It has been our pleasure to host this event. We look forward to seeing you at next year event.
I wish you all a pleasant day.
Good afternoon. Feel free to leave the venue. Thank you.
Wassalamualaikum
Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi
warahmatullahi
wabarakatuh.
wabarakatuh.